Hello and welcome to the Judo Way of Life podcast. Today I'll be joined by New Zealand judoka Justine Bishop. Hello Justine, how are you today?
Yeah, good, thanks. And yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you, good. Just like to get started off by maybe looking at how you got started in judo, where it all began for you.
Yeah, so quite a few people will know my younger brother, Alex Bishop. So he was quite an enthusiastic kid when he was growing up. And he comes home one day and to mum and dad and he says, Mum, I want to be a ninja. I want to do judo. And this guy had came along and was doing judo in schools, who is Johan Boschoff, my current coach today. So mum said, okay, yeah, fine. It's Friday afternoon, straight after school. And Justine, you can hang around as well and watch your brother, then walk him home. Because mum and dad had their own business. So essentially it was an extra hour that they didn't have us kids at home, which they liked the sound of at that time. So Alex started going along to this judo thing and I would wait around, and then the coach at the time, Johan, would say, oh, okay, Justine, just, jump on the mat. We need an extra person, or we need another girl. We've got odd partners, whatever it is. And then so week after week, I sort of jumped on and off the mat. And after about a year of doing that, I said, oh, actually, I kind of want to know how good I am. So I decided to do a grading, and I got my yellow belt straight away and did a competition a week later and won that. And I guess sort of the rest is history, that I kind of just fell in love with the sport at that point. Opportunities kept rising up from it, and stuck with it.
And how old were you when you first started tagging along with your brother to those judo classes?
I would have been about 11, I think, 10, 11, end of primary school.
Is it common for judo to be taught in schools in New Zealand?
No, definitely not. So Johan he's from South Africa, and when he came over, he started a business. So judo was his job. And he, I think, was going around different schools at that point and starting the club up from that sort of ground level. But there's, even now, I don't think there's very many clubs that teach in schools or after schools. So it's quite unusual.
And were you doing any other sports at school around that time?
Yeah, virtually everything. So I did sort of throughout my young years, I was doing athletics, netball, dancing. So dancing was on a Friday as well. So same as the judo. I played touch rugby, soccer, sort of anything and everything I was involved in.
And what was it about judo that attracted you to sort of keep going and pursue that sport?
Well, I had studied a lot more opportunities coming from it. So with different tours, so our club would do different tours around New Zealand or overseas. And we went over for a tour in South Africa, for instance, and I was competing and I was winning. I think as well, the rough and tumble of it, I really enjoyed. I kind of like that individual sport where I'm not having to rely on others, that I can just do it myself as well, which is very much a personality thing. So yeah, I think it was just one of those sports that kind of just worked well for me. There was good opportunities. I was doing well in it. I like to win things. It was quite competitive. I didn't have to rely on a team. I could just do it. So yeah, just kind of stuck with it.
Around what age did it become more than just a hobby, like just another sport? When did you start taking it maybe a bit more seriously?
Sort of probably around when I was about 15, 16, when I started going to the likes of, at that stage, it would have been Oceanias, and then the years following the pack rims and Asia comps. So that's when all my other sports sort of started to drop off one by one. I still played netball right throughout my school years, and that was just because mum had a rule. If we wanted to do an individual sport, we needed to do a team sport as well. So I stuck with netball till I was about 17. But even right through that, judo was always the priority right through high school.
And how did your training program look at that time? So balancing it with school and training.
So I guess I use mostly other sports as my cross training. I was training judo sort of 4 or 5 nights a week. And then I would just do my own running. Dad tried to do a weight training session with me in the mornings, but that was probably not the best thing for our relationship, so it didn't last very long. And then I eventually just started going to the gym by myself. Probably not till I was about 18 did I really get into like proper strength training. And even then, like, it wasn't very structured. It was more fitness and weight loss based.
Was that to keep weight for your category in judo?
Yeah.
And did you sort of structure all that yourself, or did you have help from your coach?
I guess my coach helped to some extent. It was more that, oh, you need to get stronger, or you need to do this, you need to do that. But a lot of it, I guess eventually from quite a young age, I started to sort of manage my own program and structure myself with the input from my coach and what I needed to be doing or what the end goal was.
And when you said you started competing in some of these bigger competitions, I'm assuming you were representing New Zealand at the time.
Yeah.
In terms of the pathway in that respect, how do things look moving into sort of the bigger competitions like the World Championships?
Yeah, I think this is where New Zealand really struggles. Even today, there's not a huge, how do I put it? Well, there's not really a bridge from your Asia competitions up to the Worlds. There's kind of this massive gap where you kind of just have to muddle it out and figure it out yourself. There's not a lot of guidance and recommendations around that. So I think that is something that we've all struggled with, and most New Zealand judoka will say that they've struggled with, is that trying to go from winning your Oceanias and winning your Asian competitions and then suddenly ending up in the Europe League or going over to the World Champs it's just such a big jump without a lot of structure or support behind it. So it's difficult. Even back then, like, we even had more competitions in the Asia realm with Pac Rims and Hong Kong Open that were a lot bigger and a lot more contested. But now, there's no real bridge to get you from that level to the next level unless you've got the right sort of personal coach to help you.
I don't know much about the New Zealand training. Do they have, say, like a centralized structure where they'll have like national team training sessions and go away as a squad, or is it like is it all quite individual, like you were saying?
Nah, it's quite individual. Yeah, so we don't have a centralized system. We have a national training camp maybe once, sometimes twice a year. The only events where they used to send teams to would be Oceanias, and now without having Oceanias, they've got sort of no team event that we go, or that no squad event. So I don't know what they're going to do around that. In the past couple of years, they haven't really done anything. We went to Perth as a squad, but all my competing over through Europe was done by myself. Same with like Hong Kong Taipei Open, we didn't send a team. It was just individuals that went. And Worlds, we get a supported coach. So we usually have a coach that comes to Worlds, but that's pretty much it. You're very much on your own when it comes to that elite level.
And how would you fund all these trips?
I work, mum and dad. So I've always worked mostly full-time throughout my whole career. There's been times where I've contracted and been able to work a little bit less, but yeah, basically worked full-time my whole competitive career. Never had the opportunity or the funds to be able to just train full-time. Mum and dad have obviously supported me a huge amount. I've done lots of fundraisers that I've got a few followers and a lot of the supporters in New Zealand that have been really supportive of that. A few different companies would usually donate a bit of cash. The IJF gave me funding towards certain competitions where they would pay for flights and accommodation to certain IJF world events. So was really fortunate to get that support from the IJF as well. They were really good with that.
And whilst you were balancing your work and training, how would your program look then?
Very, very long days. So I guess most recently or throughout sort of 2019, I contracted for a personal training college. So I would usually get up in the morning, train sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, go to work, smash out a whole lot of work, train in the afternoon, and do like technical stuff. So it was sort of gym early morning, technical training in the afternoon, and then do some more work up until club training, and then go and do judo that night. So I was sort of out the door at 5:30 most mornings, and then only getting home at 8:30, 9 o'clock. Even last year, it didn't change too much. I worked in a gym, so I got made redundant from that sort of contracting role and went back to working with F45. So my work day started at 5 a.m. I would work through till maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then go and fit in all my training, have a nap in my car, and then go to judo that night. And that was just a matter of, this is what I needed to do to get the funds. And also I lived quite far away from town. It was a 30-45 minute drive without traffic to get home. So there wasn't any opportunities to be able to drive home during the day. Once I was out for the day. So yeah, it kind of is a bit of a balancing act. I was very, 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 very sleep deprived. I guess sort of in hindsight, did affect my ability to train and perform well. I'm quite lucky now that I've got a really good job, that I work from home, and I've got a little bit more flexibility with my hours, and have actually been able to sleep, and it's been amazing.
And what was the motivating factor that kept you getting up at 5 a.m. and training throughout the day and pushing yourself through all the sleep deprivation?
I guess the Olympics was always a dream, and then it suddenly changed from a dream to a goal that I could actually achieve. And I think when you know what you're doing something for, it kind of, you don't see the sleep deprivation, you don't see the hunger, you don't see the missed opportunities or things that you don't get to do. You're kind of looking at this end goal and everything you need to do to be able to achieve that. So I don't think I really noticed at the time. It was only once I stopped doing it that I realized how bad it was.
Yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Well, or a terrible thing sometimes. You can look back and you're like, how did I manage to do all that?
Yeah. Like even the other day, I bumped into some of the trainers that are still there, and I was like, oh my God, I actually do not know how I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning. My alarm goes off at 8 o'clock now. I could not do that.
Yeah, I think when you're in the eye of the storm and you're just pushing on and you got that goal, I don't think you sometimes quite realize. I think it's sort of it builds up as well. So it's not just a sudden shift. From my experience when I was training full time, it was like a gradual build up through university. Started training more and more. Then when I got to full time training, it sort of just, it wasn't as much of a leap as a sort of a step up.
Yeah.
And I think back sometimes, and I get tired just thinking about the amount of training I used to do.
Yeah. It's crazy what you can do when you build up. So no, I don't know how I did it, but yeah, I guess like I said, when you've got a goal in mind and you don't see what you're having to do or what you can't do or the hard parts of it, you kind of just trudging along, and it's just one thing after the other. You keep moving.
And was the Olympics something you always wanted to do from a young age, or?
Yeah. I always think back, there was an Olympic day, back in school, like primary school and stuff, and you would have Olympic days and all the different classrooms would be a different country. And I think even back then it was just like, I'm not doing sport because I want to do sport for fun. Like I'm doing sport because I want to go to the Olympics. Like this is a dream and something that I must do type thing. So yeah, pretty crazy. Like even just primary school years, it was always something that I thought I could do and wanted to do.
And leading into the 2020 Olympics, which came 2021, how did everything look for you in terms of selection?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of broke down my campaign into different stages. So the first stage throughout 2019 was to really get loads of exposure to international competition and competing at a high level, not as focused on end results, but more about fighting well and learning and adapting. A lot of the competitions that I was going to be doing throughout 2019, I was going to be unsupported. So it's going to be by myself. And that was very much, this is how much money we have. How do we get the most out of it? And 2019, it was about, I just kind of had to go at it by myself and get that experience. But throughout that stage one, my goal was to become the highest ranked Kiwi on the world ranking list, which I was able to achieve with a couple of wins. I got a couple of wins at Asian competitions, and then first round win in the Worlds, and got 2 fifth places and a 3rd place over in the Pan American Open. So had a couple of good fights under my belt that was able to get my points up. And then from there, the goal was to go hard in 2020 with a coach following me around to get the second part of qualification, which I needed for the New Zealand Olympic Committee. And that was to get a top 16 win at the Worlds, top 7 at a Grand Prix, or beat someone on the world ranking list who was in the top 32. So, and that was going to be done through, I had the 2 comps at the Pan Americas, then I was going to go over to Europe, and I had a couple of Grand Prix, Grand Slams with training camps in between. And like I said, I was going to have a coach all the way through. So it was a very carefully planned plan based on what resources and funds I had, and when I needed to peak. So beginning of 2020, sort of come March, the day before I was about to get on a plane to go over to South America when the world shut down, I was in peak condition and ready to go win. So suddenly I went from peaking to sort of not knowing when I was going to compete again. Come around to 2021, we actually had a travel ban in place from Judo New Zealand. So I still had the highest points, but I didn't know if or when I was going to be able to get the chance to compete again, to meet that second part of the criteria, which funnily enough, they said they would still enforce. However, it wasn't recommended to travel. And then got the chance to be able to go over and compete wherever we went. I can't even remember now, Turkey, maybe Georgia. And then on the way home, Kyrgyzstan, I think it was. And was in okay condition, but obviously haven't competed for a year, haven't trained against international level athletes, so wasn't in the best condition I could be in. But yeah, it's kind of always going to be an unknown leading into selections, how much they were going to force that second part of the criteria. Like I knew that I had qualified through the IJF. I did have the Continental Quota. None of the other Kiwis were close to catching me. I had a really good lead. I had had some good results, but unfortunately they weren't willing to sort of understand or consider the impact that COVID had on my opportunities to be able to gain that second part of the criteria. So yeah, just kind of roundabout bit of an answer, but yeah, definitely beginning of 2020, I was in really good condition. And this year I was sort of building, but wasn't able to build fast enough and be in peak condition, ready to go at the competitions I needed to get the results at.
So between the world shutting down in 2020 and then the end of the Olympic qualification, So into 2021, how many competitions did you have the opportunity to try and meet that criteria?
So I had 4 competitions in total. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel sort of mentally going into those competitions, knowing sort of to a certain extent what was on the line?
I think you kind of just take it as it is. Like I knew what I needed to do, and I kind of just had to trust in the process and what I had done to be able to pull it off. I think in the past, and old me, and even sort of going back to 2019, I did struggle a lot with like pre-competition nerves and anxiety, to the point that I just feel absolutely sick before, like standing in the chute waiting to go out, like sick to my stomach and really, really nervous. And you can usually see in the first 30 seconds of my fights where it just takes me a while to switch on. And it's usually just because I'm so nervous through that whole period. And if anything, this year, I don't think I had those nerves as bad. I kind of knew where I was and what I had done. And I think I was more excited to be competing again and to have that opportunity to be out there, that I wasn't really focused on the consequences. Whereas in the past, I was probably very focused on the consequences of losing. And this time I was kind of more in a positive mindset about, I'm just happy to be out here competing again. That worry and anxiety of what happens if I don't win wasn't there as bad. So if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And don't know how the lockdown was in New Zealand. So were you still able to train effectively leading into these competitions?
No, this beginning of this year was a shocker. It was so bad. So Auckland is always the worst city to get. So I live in Auckland, and Auckland always gets thrown into lockdown compared to the rest of the country. So we have different levels. And for judo, you can only train with each other at level 2. And Auckland a couple of times went into level 3 and level 4. And it was only a week or a weekend, but that's sort of 4 or 5 days out of your training schedule where you can't train with a human body for a contact sport. It really sort of throws you out. And then you come back to level 2, and then there's even less people coming to training, or you've got more restrictions in place. And it was just sort of very disruptive right throughout. And throughout 2020, the long lockdowns we had, when we still thought the Olympics might go ahead, I had my dad put on a gi, my sister put on a gi. These are non-judo people. My boyfriend put on a gi at one point. They all bitched and moaned about their sore fingers from breaking grips. So, I mean, it wasn't ideal. The restrictions were pretty strict, and it was just so disruptive, especially the beginning of this year. I had a training camp planned, so we got to train Friday night. We had 2 sessions on Saturday, and then we had 2 sessions planned for Sunday, and Saturday night we went into lockdown. So I was like, oh, there's that training camp gone. This is like 2 weeks before I go away. So yeah, very disruptive, and it's hard to keep positive and stay focused and feel like you have that consistency when you don't know if you're going to be able to train next week, type thing.
Were there no exemptions for, obviously you qualified as on the Olympic criteria, you qualified. So were there no exemptions for, people trying to qualify or
No.
on the circuit? No?
Nothing.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone's in it together, team of 5 million over here. Everyone's locked down. So yeah, it gets pretty tough.
And then following the announcement of the Olympic qualifiers, like you say, you qualified as on a continental quota.
Yeah.
What happened following that?
So I got contacted by Judo New Zealand. They're like, you obviously they haven't announced it officially, but you hold the continental quota. Can you please come back to us with a list of your results and placings and fights for why, like how you meet the second part of the criteria. So I put it all together, and just before I sent it, I got a new email coming through, which basically lists from Judo New Zealand, which essentially listed all of the reasons why I shouldn't go, and portrayed me as quite a, I guess, poor judo player, and that I had no ability to be able to place in the top 16, which is just a first round win at the Olympics. And that's what the NZOC is looking for. They're looking for you to be able to prove that you have the potential to place in the top 16. And one of the bottom lines of this document that got sent through was that in none of my previous competitions had I proven the ability to do so, and that COVID had no effect on my opportunities to complete that qualification. So it was sort of quite a long backwards and forwards. Throughout the whole time, I didn't get any phone calls from the organisation. These people that have known me for 20 years. Just a few rather poorly worded and slightly nasty emails and connotations, which I was receiving when I was in MIQ. Fortunately, I was in MIQ with Moira, Jason, and Elliot, so I was able to talk to people. However, I wasn't allowed to have any physical contact with them because of the MIQ rules. So for about 2 weeks, it went backwards and forwards. They then came back and said, or after a few days, they said, we're officially not selecting you, or we're not nominating you to be selected by the New Zealand Olympic Committee. At which point I appealed the decision. We had an appeals meeting, which was myself, my coach, my sister as well, who I had as like a support representative and manager, and then the Judo New Zealand president, technical director, and one of the other selectors. And essentially, they just didn't really want to hear anything that I had to say. They then came back 24 hours later and said that they weren't changing the decision, at which point I went to a sports lawyer and had a conversation with them. They read through all of the communications, and he came back and he said, look, there's definitely a case there. However, the best thing that you can hope for in this situation is that the sports tribunal essentially will turn around and say to the sport that they have to reconsider based on these things, but they've got no obligation to change their mind. So you're appealing the people's opinion and their, what was the word? I can't remember what he said, but essentially you're appealing someone's opinion, and it's going to be very subjective, and all they have to say is that, well, we thought about that, but we didn't think it was worth it. So it was all very subjective. They just didn't, in my opinion, consider the effect that COVID had and some of the decisions that had been made and the lack of support, and weren't willing to look at the case I had presented on how to reduce some of the risks and effects of my ability to be able to train and be able to turn around in that next month to be able to get the best performance and gain that top 16 place. And yeah, it was quite an awful experience to go through, to be honest.
Why do you think they were so negative about the whole situation and unwilling to sort of take into consideration the past year?
They said that they didn't want their integrity to be affected with the New Zealand Olympic Committee, that if I went that and I didn't place in the top 16, that it affects their integrity. My response to that is that I don't think their integrity was on the line. I think they had the opportunity to be able to put a case forward to the New Zealand Olympic Committee. I stand by the fact that it's not the decision, but who made the decision and how it was handled. if the New Zealand Olympic Committee still turned around and said no, I could walk away from that. But the fact that my sporting body wasn't willing to show any support or put forward a good nomination was a real slap in the face.
Yeah, I'm probably preaching to the choir when I say this, but surely just having someone go to the Olympics representing for judo is only going to be a positive thing to try and encourage other people to do judo. I mean, as I say, like, I mean, even if you did sort of go out first round and didn't win, just having someone there representing and being, showing that there is this pathway.
Yeah, and I had already had quite a bit of media attention leading into the games throughout my section. I had been on national TV show, had a couple of interviews. I had been called on by Radio New Zealand to talk about the COVID situation. So I guess I was media friendly, and did have a really good profile to be able to put forward to the New Zealand population for judo. And it was something that I said to Judo New Zealand, that these are the benefits of me going for Judo New Zealand. And they turned around and said the NZOC doesn't care about those things. And I was like, I know they don't and they shouldn't, but this should be your motivation to help nominate me. This should be your nomination to be looking for a reason, essentially, why I should go, rather than investing so much time into why I shouldn't go.
Yeah, it seems quite, when you said that at the beginning that they asked for your results, it would seem quite strange that the national governing body wouldn't already know all your results.
Yeah, they had it all there. It's a very, I think it's a broken system. There's a lot of good people in the sporting organisation, and I don't necessarily have any issues with the people that dealt with it. I'm obviously upset about how they dealt with it and the lack of tact throughout, but there's a lot of areas that really need to be worked on within the organisation to help the sport grow and rebuild, because at this point we're going to constantly be running into these sorts of issues, and it's really sad. There's a lot of really good judokas in New Zealand that are just missing out on those opportunities and the lack of strategic support to help us get to that next level. But I am positive that we've got some really cool people in the organisation that had the potential to make some really good changes and help build a better pathway and better support systems to help those athletes get to that next stage.
And are you going to try and qualify for 2024?
No, 2024 is definitely off the cards for me. I'm 31 this year. I've been doing the sport for a really long time. My body's pretty broken. My wallet is very empty. And for me, it's time to start focusing on, I guess, different areas of my life, and also how I can impact the sport in different ways. So I'll always be involved in judo, but competitively, Com Games is still on the cards, but that will be my last sort of big campaign.
So we mentioned hindsight earlier on. Looking back over everything that's happened and everything you put into trying to qualify and the way it ended up, do you feel as though it's worth it?
Yeah, I think I needed to give it everything to be able to walk away and not have that sort of looming what if. My partner also used to be quite a good athlete for football, and we talk about, if I had only done this or I had only done that, or I'm never going to be the best at a sport ever again in my life. And it's this weird thing that I have, is I'm like, well, now I'm never going to be anything in the sporting world. But then you look back and you're like, but I did give it everything, and there was definitely things I should have done better or I should have done earlier, and there's always something more that you could have done, and those things will always haunt you a little bit. But I'm pretty proud of the effort that I gave. I'm proud of the person that I was right throughout my campaign. I never sort of traded in my values and who I am as a person to get what I needed. So I'm really proud of the effort that I gave, and I've had a pretty awesome journey, and I think I've got a lot to give back to the sport and other athletes and other sports across New Zealand. So it's disappointing to not get the end result, but I guess dream chasing is a high risk job.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your perspective and what happened, because I've spoken to a number of judo players that have been to the Olympics, and it's interesting to hear their tales and their experiences, and for you, obviously for yourself, maybe it wasn't quite the way you wanted it to go, but just the way you've handled it all seems quite positive and a very strong message, so probably to anyone that wanting to qualify or thinking about trying to go pursue the Olympics.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you're taking a risk, you're putting everything on the line, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what you have to be able to weigh up and hope for the best and do everything you can along the way, and make sure that you've got good people around you and a good support network for when it doesn't work, and a really good crowd to cheer for you when it does work.
So we go in a different direction now. What's been your favorite trip or maybe place that you've competed or trained in judo?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I really enjoyed my time training in Prague. I was part of a team over there, and they were really welcoming, and they were a huge lot of fun to be with. I think one of my favorite tours was the Worlds 2019 in Japan. Moira came along as to support her husband, Jason Costa. So Moira de Villiers, now Moira Costa. We hadn't been able to train and compete together for a good couple of years now, because she went off and had a child. And it was our first time being back on tour together, and we just had so much fun. It was such a good group of people, had good results, and we laughed a lot. And it was really enjoyable. So I guess that's the people around you that make a difference.
And do you have any maybe most memorable fight?
Most memorable fight? I think that would probably be, Worlds 2019, just because I was in such a good headspace, and I was really on cloud nine leading right up into it. I wasn't nervous. I went out there, I fought really well. Things that I had been working on just fell into place and started to work, and it was just an awesome fight, good result, and really good people to celebrate with afterwards. So I think that was against the Philippines girl.
And I just want to go back to something else you mentioned. You were just saying there about feeling good in the competition. You mentioned that you first 30 seconds of some of your fights, the nerves, you were just sort of working through the nerves.
Yeah.
Would you do anything in particular to try and prepare mentally for a competition? Say on the day of the competition, how would you sort of manage your nerves?
Yeah, so I'm very much a routine person. And I think most athletes are, you pack your bag exactly the same way. You have to use a certain belt, and you have to listen to a certain song. That's all those sorts of rituals were still in place. I think for me, it was very much looking for distractions. So not letting myself get in my head. So being around a group of people, trying to have conversations, and only switch on when I really had to. So once I was warming up, I'd do my warm up, but then I have to be able to come back out and socialize and be around and talk to people. Otherwise, I just get in my head and work myself up. Probably the opposite of what most people do, really.
And how would you describe your style of judo?
I'm a goer. So if you see me in training, it's sort of one attack after the other, after the other, after the other. I do get shut down quite a bit in competition. Just, again, those nerves and that lack of confidence would come through. But I kind of will brawl it out right throughout the whole fight. I'm not sort of going to give it away.
What's your favorite technique?
I love Uchimata. Uchimata doesn't always love me, but Uchimata is probably my main throw. And I know you're supposed to be Team Uchimata or Team Seoinage, but I guess I like them. I like them both. A great Seoinage, when you pull it off, both those throws, you're like, oh, yes, dream throw. It just lifts perfectly. It finishes nicely. It looks spectacular. Yeah, I can't choose between the two, to be honest. Love a Seoinage, love an Uchimata.
Yeah, like your you love an Uchimata. Sometimes it doesn't love you back comment. So I was
yeah.
I really wanted
whether
to.
Whether it's an Uchimata or a Hanigoshi, and whatever else you're going to get in between.
Yeah. I really wanted to be good at Uchimata when I was a junior player, and I just had it in my head that I wanted to just do Uchimata, and then I remember getting countered. I'd just fly in free and just send the leg up, and I got countered a couple of times, and I was like, you know what? No, it's not for me, this.
Yeah, no one in the club tries Uchimata on me because I'm a left-handed player. So I just set it up for them and then take them out as soon as they attempt it. So not too many people try that one on me anymore. But I guess that's why I like Uchimata as well. I'm left-handed. People usually have their leg there and it works out. It's always so tempting. Can't resist it. Get tricked a few times.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm a lefty, so that's why I'd get caught. I'd come too wide.
Yeah.
And just miss the mark. So
yeah, and throw yourself.
Developed a Haraigoshi instead.
Oh yeah.
That's the direction I went in.
That's good.
You mentioned, you'll always be involved in judo. So what's sort of on the list of goals now?
Yes, outside of competition, I'm involved with Auckland Judo. I'm their development director. So within our area, we're trying to build some more opportunities for our athletes to engage with each other. So we're organising the likes of like a grassroots camp, want to look at how we can engage with other areas as well. So actually taking teams to different areas and just, looking at really building different opportunities for our athletes to be involved. So that's kind of like my passion project at the moment. And then I study sports management in my spare time. So I'm doing a degree in sports management. So that is the end goal, is to help work with sports organisations with their strategic planning and building both competitive and non-competitive pathways and looking at longevity in sport, whether you're competing as an athlete, as a high performance athlete, or if you want to go down a coaching route, an officials route, a referees route, that there's a pathway for everyone to be able to stay within the sport.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to finish, what advice would you give to a budding young judoka who just started, maybe say like 11, 12-year-old, who did have their eyes set on going to the Olympics? What advice would you give them?
Look at the people around you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I should have asked for help a lot earlier with a lot of different issues throughout my career. And I think I felt like I always had to do everything on my own. And it's 100% not the case. You've got good people around you, whether it's your parents, and if you don't feel like you can talk to your parents, or you don't know if you can talk to your coach, then find a friend or an adult or a teacher or an older judoka, or send me a message. But make sure you reach out and look at those different people that are there to help hold your hand and just take the load off. You're not doing this on your own. And if you try and do it on your own, you might be successful, but you're going to have a really very lonely and very hard journey, and you won't enjoy it. So the success won't be what you expect, or almost be a relief than anything else. So ask for help.
Oh, fantastic. Really appreciate your time today, Justine. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
No worries. Thanks for having me.